Good, good. Just tell me a little bit about Devin off the field, maybe something we all know about his rugby exploits, but just maybe tell me something that tells us about him as the man away from the rugby field.
Like he's just such a unique, isn't he? You know, we're just even next door talking around. You know, Irish people love coming up to tall people and going, "Oh my Lord, look at this height of you," whereas. And I find it unbelievably annoying most of my life. But I've actually gone up to Devin the first time I saw him. I was like, "Oh my Lord, look at the size of you!" Like he's just a different level. Like in terms of size, you know, like we've seen a lot. We've seen a number of pictures of him even as a kid growing up, and you know, like playing for North Kildare and with Castleknock in school and a bit of GA stuff as well. Some of the pictures. And like they're like you couldn't like make them up, like how much of how he stands literally head and shoulders above the rest. In some cases when he's kneeling on the ground he's still taller than people standing up. So you know, so the size bit, like and how that influences young people in terms of, you know, like Irish kids, like boys, like there's always a bit of self-conscious in us, isn't there? So if you're that really tall guy that's standing out from the crowd, because quite often like we want to just fit in, and you know it's next to impossible for him just to fit into the crowd because he's always going to stand out from everybody else, and he's such a likable person, Dev. You know, I remember seeing him play for the Irish schoolboys first when, you know, against Wales. I remember that was when I first sort of laid eyes on him, and I'd heard about this guy. He was whatever, close to 7 foot tall. Playing underage in Castleknock, and then you get to see him, and then they start to say, "Oh, well, can this guy? What will he be like in terms of Leinster?" And I was away in England when he came through first, so he would have had a Michael Cheika screaming in his ear for a few years. And in terms of trying to, you know, bring that bit of edge to his second row play. And yeah, like so, I would have played a good bit with Dev, and you know, as I'm getting older, trying to help him come through in many ways. You know what I mean? Because, you know, when I'm not getting picked for like national teams or whatever else, you're trying to help some of the young guys along, and it's sort of gone full circle in many ways, and that's what Dev is doing with some of the young guys now. Over the last while, when he stopped getting picked in national camps, so that's the important bit, and he's been excellent in that regard, Dev. And yeah, like he's such a popular guy in the dressing room. You know, very easygoing bloke off the field. Doesn't get that stressed by things, and you know, takes it all in stride. But yeah, no, he's had an amazing career when you think back to. Well, you think back, okay, he's Leinster's most capped player. So how he's managed himself over the course of his career, you know, is testament to his. You know, I guess his easygoing nature, because, you know, he just trucks on. He trucks on well during the course of a season. You know, between his Leinster and Ireland caps, like it's a fair old haul, and then throw in some of the actual trophies that he's won along the way as well with Ireland and with Leinster. It's an amazing feat, really, when you think back to that kid on the GA pitches where he's literally head and shoulders above the rest, wearing a pair of glasses. Playing so as well. Some of the images are stuck in my mind, so you'd have to see them to believe them.
Just we were talking to Devin a moment ago about the career trajectory of somebody, so they come onto the scene, and over the years they seem to get better with experience. But about 7 or 8 years ago, Devin seemed to have a spurt in his playing ability, for want of a better phrase, where he was becoming more than just a dependable set piece guy and restart guy. He was adding bits and pieces to his game. Do you remember that period, and who was around him influencing him or talking to him, and had brought him onto a new level that you don't usually see? It was a sharp spike in his performance levels around that time.
Yeah, well, if you think, you know, Chex as a coach in Leinster for 5 years, who would have given Devin a lot of caps in his younger years. I think Dev is sort of, I guess, trying to pick up bits and pieces from a few older locks like Heinze and Brad Thorne and, you know, Malcolm O'Kelly. Like, those guys have been around, you know, so like he learned plenty, and then he's starts knocking around Irish camp from the likes of Paul O'Connell, Donegal Callahan, and, you know, Joe becomes the Irish coach, and, you know, there's that sort of period where Ireland are very successful, and Devin is a sort of key component in all that, because it's his understanding of the pieces that Joe's game required. So he had that experience of Joe and Leinster, and then he becomes the experienced player, and I think he gets more and more confidence from the doing it, and because he's so consistent in terms of being available for week on week on week of games, that you saw that in his performances. So like he had some huge games for Ireland at different stages, which has been fantastic to see, and delighted for him. And he's, as I said, he's had a lot of support off the field, family wise, and it means a huge amount to them, I know. And so it's a great story, great career, and we'll certainly miss Dev. But the big thing is for us is it's the passing on the baton, and I think he's been very good with some of the young locks that we have. I think we'll see a lot of those guys come through hopefully in the next couple of years as well.
Very good. Just the last one from me. Can you just give me an update on James Ryan, and how is he? And I know that before, the protocols would have meant that if he accumulated a certain amount of concussions, he would go to see a specialist. Did that count with subsequent head injuries? Yeah. So James he'll be seen by the people that he's seen before, James, and the bang is when Charlie Hughes shoots out the line, and that's obviously the type of tackle that World Rugby are trying to get rid of, and for obvious reasons, and it's still probably the biggest challenge we have in the game. So in terms of trying to change some of the player behaviours as the defender in particular, it was an unlucky bang that he gets in the game, slightly different to maybe some of the bangs that he would have had before, James. So it's trying to differentiate that as well, and that's trying to leave it up to the experts as well. So there's a lot of data that we're trying to gather, even. Obviously we talked about the gum shields and stuff that we wear now in terms of trying to monitor that training load, and for someone like a James who has had some head knocks, I think that does at least give some level of comfort and growing everyone's understanding, but ultimately we just wanted to make sure we do what's best by James, and we'll see he'll get sent to the best people that we can send him to, essentially. And try and do what's best, because James is still a very, very young man, and we want to make sure that we're doing best by him, whatever that is. So he'll go through that process at the moment. We're not going to rush the process. We're not trying to rush him back for any particular game. We'll just do what's best by him. Very good. Thanks, Leo. Best of luck.
Thanks. Yeah.
Leo, it's Don here. Would you say that you were spoiled by Devin's dependability in the line out? And certainly the fans enjoyed it. And how do you replace that consistency?
It's very handy having a guy who's 7 foot tall when it comes to winning ball in the line out, for sure. But his work at restarts as well, restarts is such a big moment in a game as well. So if you think every time you score a try, you're back to the halfway line, that dependability of restarts, and this Dev is as good as anyone in the game. So very good aerially, and that's a different type of skill set, that aerial skill set, to be catching the ball above your head that's being kicked from a restart, basically. So he's great strength in that area. But he's also got some great subtle touches as well, and very good handling abilities. So he's been a very good link player for us at different stages as well. So it's not just line out. I think obviously that's the obvious bit, but there's lots of other subtleties to his game. So but it's the durability, I guess, and being able to be fit and available for so many big games. And think back to lots of the big games that Leinster played and the role that Dev has played in them. Particularly, as you point out rightly, line out, it's such a key moment in games that he has that dependability, that he's able to win good ball and good quality possession for the team. So that's why I will always slag Dev off over the years. I was there to throw to the guy who's 7 foot tall, Dev, which is you. So if I was 7 foot tall, I'd just be throwing the ball to myself all the time. Dev quite often was trying to manage, and his nice nature was sometimes he'd throw the ball somewhere else. I think I was 7 foot tall, I just throw it to myself all the time. So, but he's had an amazing career, Dev, and we wish him well in this next chapter of his life. And as I said, the role that he's going to play, hopefully a big role for us now between now and the end of the season, because we hope we'll be involved in plenty of big games. You know, we've a huge game this weekend now against Connacht, so that's where our focus clearly is at the minute. You know, Connacht, you know, they've had some big scalps already at home this year. You think Bulls, Munster, Stormers, Stade Francais, they've had some big wins. So we know it's going to be a tough challenge for us this weekend. But that's the exciting bit to look forward to. Hopefully Dev will have a big role to play in the next while.
How you doing, Leo? It's William from Galway Bay FM here. I'll step in there. 3 games coming up against Connacht in 4 weeks. I know 2 of them are in Europe, but that's very unusual, even in professional rugby. That generally doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's very unusual, you're right. And you know, obviously the teams know each other pretty well anyway. So you know, Connacht, a lot of players, ex-Leinster guys that are down there, that would know us very, very well. And they're guys that are, you know, will be proud and looking to put in big performances against us. And we had a good ding-dong battle here in the RDS already. You know, Connacht beat us in the RDS last year as well. So it's going to be a good handful. Like I said, I think there'll be 3 great games hopefully. And obviously they've extended in terms of the capacity of the sports ground for this weekend. And yeah, there'll be a good vociferous crowd down there, no doubt. And then similar for Europe. So we hope they're going to be great occasions. And in many ways, like, celebrate what's good about provincial rugby in Ireland as well. So yeah, no, it's going to be a good challenge for us, for our guys. So you know, we've suffered down in Galway in the past, so our guys have experienced a bit of pain down there in the past. So you know, we know it's going to be a really, really tough challenge for us.
It's interesting as well. You're talking about, you know, there's some players coming down here next season. I'm looking at Adam Byrne and, you know, Peter Dooley, Josh Murphy. They're coming, but they're still with you at the moment. So that's an interesting counterpoint, because they still have a job to do for Leinster, but they are heading west for next year.
Yeah, like, I think there was a bit of uncertainty for lots of guys, you know, during the middle of the season. That is just the nature of a contracting cycle. And that is what it is. You have to sort of navigate that during the course of a season. And I know there's all these announcements comes, you know, in a block, you know, period. But obviously those conversations gone on for probably several months prior to that. But once that's out of the way, I think the guys are just fully focused on delivering for the here and the now, because that's just the nature of the rugby season and the game, the way the game is structured. Because guys generally are contracted more often than not on a 2-year cycle, so half your squad is out of contracts every year. And you go through the cycle. So, you know, some guys are maybe potentially on 1 year or 3 years, but generally it's a 2-year cycle. So 50% of your squad are off contract. So and you know, there's other opportunities for potentially elsewhere, and guys move on for lots of different reasons. But for us now, it's the group we have worked very, very hard to get ourselves in this position where we are in the league. You know, we're sitting top at the moment with 5 regular season games to go. We'd love to be able to stay at top of the league, because for the playoff games we know that's very, very important, because obviously 1 plays 8, 2 plays 7, blah 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 blah, as we all know. So we want to make sure we're in as good a possible position as possible, because there's a lot of work has gone in to get us into that situation. So everyone's committed to that. And then there's Europe, you know, because that's straight into knockout. I know it's last 16 knockout home and away, so it's not fatal if you lose the first game, but you know, you want to make sure you're getting points on the board as quick as possible in these games. But that's a very unusual dynamic. But if you remember, this time last year we were straight into a final against Munster after the Six Nations, which was again a slightly different dynamic. So some of those Six Nations guys will get managed slightly differently now. And we'll obviously deal with the challenges as they come along. But you know, the group have worked hard to get us in this situation. Some guys that are going to be moving on, whether that's the player that's retiring or moving to another club, I don't think it should matter, because I think they're all fully committed to the here and the now, which is trying to make some memories with the players that they've worked so hard with over the course of the last X amount of months. Because as we know, the Northern Hemisphere season, as can drag on, We started the season. Things looked like they were going quite well. We had the November period where a lot of guys didn't play, so we were trying to navigate some of the moving parts around, and that's in many ways why a lot of guys have made the decision to move on, because there was no rugby during that November period. Then we had the Christmas period with the COVID challenges that were well documented. Then we had more games rescheduled into the Six Nations, which is great for this group because they played a good chunk of games now. We had a bit of time off last week, and now it's trying to refresh ourselves, get ready for this block of games. But we know Connacht will be smart off the back of their heavy loss away in Edinburgh, and I wouldn't read into history would tell us not to read a huge amount into those types of games. As I said, Connacht have had some good scalps in the sports ground in particular this season, and we've had some of those challenges ourselves over the course of the last number of years down there. So our group will be well aware of that. We know Connacht are a well coached team, difficult to play against, and it should be a good ding-dong battle, I'm sure.